It's probably been a week. He downloaded so quickly on Monday, probably in 10 minutes, which is a record. Because I think this word, it's on correction, and he wants to correct the heart of correction, which is kind of funny because he's correcting how we view correction. In it, he kind of warned me, he's like, you're gonna be a weeping prophet today, so just let it go. So the glasses are over there because it's heavy. But it's his heart. His heart's heavy for his church. He's seen the hurt there. He's seen how people have gone in his name and how they've tried to correct the best way that they knew how, and he knows that. But now people abhor correction. When they get corrected, they feel ashamed. They feel condemned, like they did something beyond wrong, not seeing that it's bringing their heart back in alignment. Because perfection has overtaken. Because shame is overtaken. And so for some people, this is going to be a download, a message that you're going to get to carry back to people. For others, it's going to heal the hurt that you've had that you didn't realize is standing in the way of going deeper with him. Because you were corrected in a way that was not of him. And it's left you ashamed, it's left you condemned. You feel like you can't get close, you can't draw near. Because you're afraid that if he corrects one thing in you, it's a judgment on you and it's the end all. And you're afraid of punishment. There's no punishment in his love. There's no punishment in his love. When he's correcting, he's doing it because you were out of alignment, because of the way that you were raised, and that's not your fault. We were all raised in something. Some of us came from backgrounds with churches. Some of us came from broken families. And he sees that. And he knows that's why we are the way that we are. He knows that's why there were walls that were built up to protect yourself. But when he comes in, he's taking out all those walls because he knows the beauty of the surroundings that's going to come. He doesn't want those walls anymore. And he can do it fast if we let him. There's pain that's been carried for years because of what others have said. And they may have meant well, but it wasn't said well, and it wasn't received well. And the enemy used it as a foothold and a wedge that drove you away from the group, that drove you away from the family atmosphere of him, from his heart of the Father. And it's hurt a lot. And he wants to heal. And with what's coming, the motivations of the heart is what he's going to start getting at, because you can't fill up with more of him like we were singing if we're not making room for more. And there's rocks in the way. He's still a rock cleaver. He plants that seed, he waters and he grows, but it can't expand outwards and it can't go deeper if there's things blocking him from going. But what he shows is those roots are strong, but they have to have permission to remove those rocks. And there's hurts that are deep that we don't remember anymore because we've thought we've moved past it and we healed, but then we get to this point, this level with him, and he goes, we got to move it. And I know it's going to hurt to bring it up again, but it's going to be gone this time. And this time we're not going to sit in it. I just need you to acknowledge that it's there and tell me I can move it. And so what he really wants to do, I've been digging through this and he's been sifting for probably a week now with scriptures, but what he really wants to do is correct our view of correction. So correction is it's not a detriment to us. It's a benefit. It's actually a gift from him. That he loves us too much to leave us where we're at would hurt him more. He wants to restore. His wisdom lies in his discipline. His love lies in his discipline because it matches his character. In his discipline, it's holy and righteous and just. We've seen a lot of examples of fleshly discipline that come out of anger, that come out of frustration and irritation, that come out of you're not good enough and why are you still sitting here? And unfortunately, because of that example that was before us, we've reflected it on him because they stood in his name and proclaimed his name. Right. And we carry God. And so when we lash out like that, those people that we're ministering to, they don't see us lashing out. They see him lashing out. And you've now broken their ability to see him as a heavenly, loving Father who's perfect and gives good gifts. And that's the warning as we go forward, as he pours out this new wine. We have to be so mindful because the religious spirit, all they've ever received is that beating over the head that I'm not good enough, I'm a sinner. If we come in with correction that in our heart, we know where we're coming from, but they can't see it because it's not how it's coming out, they're not going to know. All they're going to hear is what they've heard before. It needs to come softly. It needs to come with love that they can feel it. And we need to be okay if that's with tears. We need to be okay if that's with hugs for a long time where it's almost uncomfortable for us. But that's what they need in that moment. Because what you're transferring and imparting in that laying on of hands or in that hug is his heart. And there's been so many times when you hug that person and when you speak softly the truth that they've always needed to hear, he's gently releasing that pain and his hand is on them. And that wound that has been festering for so long, for some of them decades, you're allowing him to reach in and apply this healing salve and remove the infection. And you're removing the blockage. And they get to see him for the first time and see his heart and realize you were never mad at me. You've been running after me the entire time. Godly discipline trains us to be imitations of Christ on the earth. There's times to confront, but there's times to stand in the gap. And with what's about to come, there's going to be more standing in the gap because he is going to deal with the ones and confront them that are standing in the way. If we focus our eyes fully on those people, we miss the hurt because the enemy he's going to allow this move to come, but he's going to not allow those roots to grow down and he's going to choke it out. And we have to stand on guard for those seeds of love to be sprouted in these people's hearts as his spirit comes down on them. And they begin to realize that everything that I had learned from before was wrong. And because of the background they're coming out of, they're going to sit in condemnation first. And the enemy's going to hold them there. And we have to block that by continuously speaking life and hope and love and comfort and compassion with gentleness and mercy into them so that they realize that the cross did what he said it would, that sacrifice was fully paid, and that they are worthy of love. And he is a redeemer of time, that the time that they spent in the church for that long, he redeems it, yes. That they didn't miss it. Because they're going to think they missed it and they're going to be hurt. Yeah. And if we speak on top of that, it's just going to push them down more. And they're not going to hear his heart. So right now it's the time of renewal and restoration for these people with this fresh, gentle breeze that's going to blow in because they're going to be hungry and realize this is what I've been looking for the entire time. This is where my strength is found. It's not in the flesh. It's not in the correction of my flesh. When their spiritual eyes are open and they realize the demonic is real, they're going to run in fear because they're going to realize all the problems they've had in the source of it. And we're going to have to hold them there and say, no, he is who he says he is, and he has conquered this because he has triumphed over them.
That's right.
And he has crushed them with his heel. That's right. And that's going to have to come out of a place of love to understand the fear that's coming in them. Because we're so used to it, we're going to laugh. We're going to laugh at it like, how did you not know? How could they know if they never heard?
Right.
How could they know if they were never taught? It's going to be a time of teaching, of restoration, where they're going to hear the full gospel for the first time, And they're going to realize we sat in this partial truth. And God doesn't like half truth. And that's what they've been sitting in. Some of them, they're already in their 70s and 80s and they're about to get this renewal because he wants every generation.
Yes.
He doesn't want to leave them where they're at. And if they're willing, he's knocking.
Yes.
And that's going to be a lot to undo. And we're going to have mercy for them as those blinders come off. Because it's almost like sunglasses. The light's been shining super bright, but they've gone indoors with the sunglasses on. And they've only seen a reflection of who he is. When those sunglasses come off, it's going to hurt their eyes so bad. And we're going to have mercy for them as their eyes adjust. And we're going to carry them forward the way that he wants us to. Because he wants us as an army. Like Brian was saying, he wants us to come together as an assembly. And for some of those people, because of the timing and how long it took, we're going to be carrying them in. We're going to be holding them up. Because they still deserve to hear, because they finally saw.
Yes.
But we're going to get to go forward together because we're stronger together than we are apart. The thing with correction that causes people to run is it's painful in the moment. And when it's painful in the moment, they believe that surgery has to last forever because they get lost in that one moment of pain and they immediately flip into condemnation that I must have been doing something wrong, which, yeah, but it's only for a moment because once that correction is made and you're back in alignment with him, because that's all it is, it's just realigning. We've made it to be so much more because of perfectionism. It's just realigning. It's like a little flick back on the walk, back onto the path, where you kind of stumbled off a little bit and he just rights you back and gets you right over here. Hurts a little bit because you might have twisted your ankle in that, but he's just putting you back on the path. But when you look up the definition for correction, it literally means a change that rectifies an error or an inaccuracy. That's all it means. It's not punishment. It's just righting something that was wrong in the first place that you didn't even realize was wrong. How we were raised and the culture we were raised in, especially our culture, we deal with pride a lot and independence. When you realize you have to be dependent on God, there's some correction there. When you realize that it's not about you or how you look, like crying in front of people as you're releasing something that they need, it's not about you. So your pride has to die. And that's going to be hard for people because they've worn masks for so long. Some of us have worn masks for so long, and when you experience that freedom, you're like, why did I ever wear that mask? Because it was so heavy. What was the point?
Right.
Because it mattered at some point because of how we were raised, that we had to be perfect all the time, that we had to look like we had it all together. How we were raised shaped our worldview, and it shaped our decision making, shaped our motivations. But now that Christ has stepped into our lives because he knocked and we let him in, he doesn't just want one room, he wants all of them. And that house is big. And depending on how long they've been building it, there's going to be more rooms to readjust.
Yes.
So having mercy as their whole kingdom comes tumbling down. And as that interchange begins, the outer sanctification starts. They don't realize the full inside's now been swept clean. But now the outside has to start changing to match what the inside looks like. And that inner transformation working its way out is so that his light can shine forward, which means there's going to be some cracks. You got to get out of the way. Because if the light's shining and you're standing in front of it, you're casting your shadow on people, not him. So you got to check your heart on what you're speaking. Because if you're standing in the way because you want the attention or you want that promotion or you want to be like, God spoke to me, you're casting your shadow on these people, not his light. And you're blocking them from ever hearing him. And that's what a lot of the hurt has been. Because the unanointed have gone up. Because they were like, I got this title. And I got this promotion. So I heard from God. And the crazy part is a lot of times they're quaking in their boots. So they already know they weren't anointed to get up there in the first place. But now they have to push through.
In their flesh.
And they're casting their shadow on people. And that's all some people have ever seen.
Oh my God.
So what happens when we come in like a shining light because we've gotten ourselves out of the way? We blind people. And we're going to have to be okay with allowing them to adjust, because their eyes are going to hurt for a little bit because they've only ever seen darkness, even among their leaders, because they've cast shadows the entire time. And so as we raise people up, we're going to have to teach them how to step out of the way so that their shadow isn't cast, because they're going to have to deal with the same things that they've seen before, because it's easy to slip back into what you saw before than to allow something new to begin. So there's some major renovations going on. And they're just going to keep happening. It's starting with those who are going to lead the march, and then it's going to overflow into the ones that they're leading. And so as he corrects things, we have to be okay that it's going to hurt for a little bit. But we get to go first because he wants to bring in the rest of them. And once we know how to walk in correction, it's going to teach them how to walk in correction, because they're going to imitate us as we imitate him. So there's going to be some complete upheavals of previous thought patterns, renewing your mind daily. There's going to be lifestyles that are completely overturned, because we have different sides of the spectrum from every church. You've got ones who are like, whatever, it's fine, he corrected me, we're going to keep moving on. Then you got the other side where it's like they are sitting in a cage because they thought correction was like prison. You're going to get both sides of this, the worldly side and the religious side, now coming into alignment. And it's going to be complete upheaval of these thought processes and these lifestyles of things they allowed or things they never thought they could do. You're going to see both ends. And we're going to have to be flexible to meet both. And if we can't meet both, you need to step aside and know that there's somebody else who's probably walking with you that has this background that can do it better, and being humble enough to say, I can't do it. What was once okay in our previous citizenship, because we're citizens of heaven, what was once okay in the previous citizenship of this world is no longer beneficial. He wants us holy, because he is holy.
Yes.
And that new reality of being citizens of heaven means that there's going to be some complete upheavals for people because they sat in their worldly citizenship not realizing they had a passport to go somewhere else.
Yes.
And they're not living in that kingdom.
Yes.
And that's why when we walk into places, they see the difference, because we're walking in our citizenship of a different place.
There you go.
And they say, why do they understand something that I had never seen before? Because we've opened up the eyes to the kingdom culture instead of the worldly culture that a lot of people sit in. So regardless of what nation you minister to, you may have to find the gaps that exist within their culture, but it's not your culture you're pouring in. It's his culture you're pouring in. And we have to be mindful of that, because of regardless of the background that people are coming in, the culture we're pouring in should look the same, because we're one spirit and one mind. So one thing that he was really, really highlighting, and they kind of bounce off each other, is thinking on this question: what's your motivation behind correction? What's your motivation behind doing this? Are you correcting to restore that person to holiness and build them up? Or are you correcting to build yourself up and tear them down? And that check in the heart is sometimes really hard to see, because you know what you're saying is right. But a lot of times it has to do with the timing and the way it's delivered. Because he knows what that person needs to hear and how to say it. And if we're not fully submitted, we can still say the right thing, but do it in the wrong spirit.
That's it.
And it's still going to hurt them.
Yeah.
A lot of times people don't realize they're worthy of love. And they're looking for the father heart of God. And so if we correct out of correction's sake, they miss the father heart of God, and they just get more of what they're used to. So, are we more concerned with the black and white being upheld than loving the person back into the will of God?
Good question.
That's it. That's it.
Check your heart.
You'll see it in our frustration level.
Yeah.
God doesn't get frustrated with us. When we are trying to help somebody, but we're frustrated with them.
That's us.
That's us.
Yeah. And I think something he's been teaching me is it's okay to step back if you get frustrated.
Yeah.
Don't push forward in it. Yeah.
we don't always want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's necessary.
Because we feel like, oh, if we step back, they're going to miss it. Redeems time. He'll hold them there.
We want God to give us time to get our stuff straightened out, but we want everybody else to do it immediately.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's right, brother.
Yeah. It's hard to look back and remember sometimes how long it took us to learn lessons that we're trying to force on other people to do faster.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's our pride. If we're frustrated with somebody else, it's our pride that's doing it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And so it's having mercy for those people as they learn the lessons that when we look back, it may have taken us years to do. And we pray that it won't take them years, because a lot of times we can look back and be like, man, if I had just gotten this one lie dealt with, I could have done this a lot faster. But it's not regret when we say that, it's understanding now, and it's wisdom that we didn't have then. And we can pour that out on them, but we still have to have mercy if they need the long process too.
Right.
Because they may be just as stubborn as we were. But on the flip side of things, because everything he does is always in a balance. He's always correcting one end, and then he also doesn't want us to shove all the way over to the other end, because it should be balanced in the center. Because he's always speaking in spirit and truth, and we're seeing that balance coming back to the center. So with correction, his heart behind it, love is not always soft and gentle, but it's also a process. So it shouldn't come out hard at first if this person has never been confronted on the issue that you're dealing with.
Right.
But love is fierce. It's not just keeling over for somebody. Sometimes you're having to hold that person up as they walk through a battle because they're not seeing what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's walls that you actually need to be the javelin that shoves a crack into it so that they actually look out the hole and go, oh man, it's so much nicer out there. Why did I put this wall up in the first place around my heart? So love is fierce and fights for what's best for that person in the long term. And I think that's the hard part, is we have to have vision. We have to have vision for that person's life. We have to have vision for what God put on the inside of them the moment they were saved that they have yet to understand and see for themselves.
Yes,
See
very
them
good.
in their full potential.
Exactly.
God sees them.
That's right.
Exactly. So when correction happens and it's done out of love, you have to look at it in the long term, not just the short term. Sometimes feelings are going to get hurt because it's a lie that's been dug deep for a long time and you're pricking it. And you're trying to upheave a wall that's been there for so long, they forgot it was there. They thought it was right. And even when you show them the truth in the scriptures, it still hurts because it's heart surgery. But you still fight for that person. And even if the Lord says, okay, now they don't need words, they just need intercession. You step back and you fight just as fierce on your knees as you did when you were sitting next to them.
Amen.
That's right.
So true love fights for their eternity, their calling, and their purpose. True love draws them into the refining fire so that they can be prepared for their purpose. Correction is one form of this physical manifestation of love mandated by God. Because his love has so many facets. And it's amazing when you look at everyone in his body and you get to see a part of that love being portrayed in a way that maybe you don't fully function in. Because you haven't discovered that side of his love yet. And so we're constantly getting to rub up against each other and learn something new about his love. So the only scripture I think we really need to sit on is in Hebrews 12. It's going to be verses 4 through 14. So this is kind of where, like, if there's a verse that stands out, just start going on off of it. If there's another thing that, like, he jumps you to, speak it out so we can be building each other up. Seeing correction the way that we should have seen correction the whole time. And pulling out for each other the wisdom that he has within his word for it.
What was it?
Hebrews 12, 4 through 14. So I think see. I have Amplified. Are you guys good if I just read it?
Fine, yeah.
Okay. Because Amplified, I just love what it does. You have not yet struggled to the point of shedding blood in your striving against sin. And you have forgotten the divine word of encouragement, which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not make light of the discipline of the Lord. And do not lose heart and give up when you are corrected by him. For the Lord disciplines and corrects those whom he loves. And he punishes every son whom he receives and welcomes to his heart. I think when we read those verses, you see discipline and you shrink back. You see punishment and you shrink back. Because those words have such a negative connotation in our culture, and especially with the backgrounds that we can come from. But he addresses, I never saw it before, but he addresses two mindsets when he's talking to the son here. He says, do not make light of the discipline, because it's easy to brush it off and not fully learn the lesson he's trying to teach you.
Right.
Yeah. We read that and we think that's what God does to everybody else.
It's true.
Our mind just jumps right over. We don't need that. God does that for everybody else.
Yeah. And I was like, whatever. It's a good point, but
Yeah.
I'm good.
Not for me.
That's usually when the test has to come around a bunch of times. And let's be honest, no one likes taking tests. But he's going to make sure you get the passing grade before it finishes.
Yeah.
So if you want to keep repeating that grade, take it lately.
Yeah.
It's not fun. But then he jumps to the other camp, because there's two camps he's addressing, with the making light, but then also falling into the discouragement. Don't lose heart and give up when he's correcting you. He's not correcting you to hurt you. He's correcting you so that you look more like him.
Yeah.
And you understand him more, which is just going to deepen the intimacy you have with him if you let him do the perfect work.
Yeah. Yes.
So he exhorts us and continues on. He says, you must submit to correction for the purpose of discipline. God is dealing with you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? So we see a lot of that right now, especially with the generation like millennials, and like I think I fall just shy of a millennial, like missed it by a year or something. But you see what happened when the correction, that generation who was corrected so hard, they said, I'm never going to do that to my kids.
Right.
They went from one end of the spectrum all the way to this other extreme where they didn't train or teach their children anything. And we see these monsters running around.
Exactly.
Who are selfish and greedy.
Narcissists.
Yes. And it's so hard because you look at that like, how can you be like that? Well, their parents didn't train them up in the way they should go.
Right.
So they don't depart from it.
Yeah.
That's a lot of correction that's needed there. Can you imagine what it's like when they come to Christ?
Right.
How much of that has to be broken off?
Right. And really, it's the sins of the fathers
Yeah.
visiting the sons to the generations. Because it's not just their parents, it's the parents before.
Yeah.
How far are you going to go back and blame? Somebody just has to stop
Yeah.
and seek
good.
God.
That's right.
To stop,
Yeah.
break the curse and go forward,
That's
you know.
right.
That's good.
The blaming that goes on keeps people stagnant.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that blame game has to die. It's
Yeah.
like one of the first things that has to die. So now if you are exempt from correction without discipline in which all of God's children share, then you're actually illegitimate children and not sons at all.
Right.
Kind of changes the view on correction. You're like, never mind, Lord, correct me. Because I want to be legitimate. But you're not legitimate if you don't look like him. The whole point of salvation was to draw you back into what was always meant to be and not what it turned into.
That's right.
That's right.
And so all of this correction that's going to start happening all around us as he pours out his spirit,
Right.
they're going to realize I've been illegitimate.
Yes.
But now I've received the full revelation of the spirit of adoption within me that cries, Abba, Father. Abba, Father. They're going to have to unlearn the pain and the hurt that they've walked through because they thought they had to walk this such tight line, and then they realize so much freedom.
Right.
That's going to be so hard for people because they got comfortable being cramped in a locked room. Now they realize we have this entire field to run through. It's going to take some stretching.
going back to legitimacy,
Mm-hmm.
we have a nation of illegitimate children in the natural and in the spiritual.
Yeah.
And it starts back with the fathers.
Mhm.
And, that's kind of my heart, is that the fathers would rise up again.
Yeah.
That God has to restore them to their rightful place so we can stop all this illegitimacy, not only in the natural families, but in the spiritual families,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, if we because we live among a nation of illegitimate children, we're comfortable with that situation. But if you think about how illegitimacy was treated years and years ago, especially like in England, what they would do is all of these dukes and stuff would have all these illegitimate children, and they would put them off in the country to be raised elsewhere. They would never know their children, and that child would not get an inheritance. They would get nothing from their fathers.
Yeah.
And so when we have them among us now, but if you think about the culture that this was written in, those children didn't have anything from their fathers. And so when God is making that statement, it's a stark difference between a father that loves their child, raises their child, and gives them an inheritance, versus a bastard who got nothing, who never knew their father, who had no promise of anything.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when he's speaking those words, he's saying, that's not you. This is you. I want to know you. I have a promise for you. I have an inheritance for you.
That's good. Yeah, the next part of it. For our earthly fathers disciplined us for only a short time, as seemed best to them.
To them.
There's a lot of resentment and bitterness that's going to have to die
Yeah.
for them to receive full forgiveness, because you can't walk in unforgiveness, because when you've been forgiven much, yeah.
It's the only way to break the cycle.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, we have to forgive our parents,
Yeah,
and our children have to forgive us,
yeah.
for them to break the cycle to move into what God wants for them.
Yeah. And it's beautiful with that grace, because he's already given it to you in full portion. It's just unlocking it. And it's releasing that pain and that hurt that's been built up, and seeing them through God's eyes, realizing that there's actually something influencing them. It's not
Right.
truly them. And when you can dissociate and recognize the difference between that,
Yeah.
then you start to understand why you can have mercy for those people too. The ones who beat you, the ones who hurt you,
Yes.
emotionally, physically, sexually,
Yeah. Or neglected.
or neglected. You start dissociating because you realize that it's not fully them. You're kind of used as a puppet.
Exactly. I always tell people when counseling with them is that you have to understand that they were incapable at the time. They were incapable of giving
That's
you
good.
what you needed at the time.
Yeah, that's good. There's going to be a lot of dissociating that's going to have to happen.
Yeah.
But he disciplines us for our good, so that we may share his holiness. For the time being, no discipline brings joy, but seems sad and painful. Yet to those who have been trained by it, afterwards it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness, right standing with God, and a lifestyle and attitude that seeks conformity to God's will and purpose. So it's painful for the moment, but if you can have vision for what lies behind it, you can walk through it.
Yes.
I think a lot of times we get stuck and we turn it into a pit, because we get so bogged down by the correction that's happening, we forget the heart behind it that's going to get us farther. So then strengthen your hands that are weak and the knees that tremble. Cut through and make smooth, straight paths for your feet that are safe and go in the right direction, so that the leg which is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather may be healed. Continually pursue peace with everyone in the sanctification without which no one will ever see the Lord. I added that last verse because it didn't fully fit, but then he was like, correction is sanctification.
It is.
And he's literally saying, if you will not submit to the correction, you will never see the Lord. Why? Because you don't know what you're looking for. Because you haven't actually discovered his heart. So I really feel like we just need to be ending an intercession for the church, because the season that he's had us in, preparing us for, is pouring in the new wine. Checking the motivations of the heart. And it's not just for us, it's for them. And they don't even know what they need to be asking for to be ready. But it's coming.
You know, you hit on one area. It reminded me of different levels of growth, maturity. And we've been through it once. We've received the chastening. We threw aside or threw down the offense.
Yeah.
Because we can be offended by God.
Yeah.
We can be offended by one another. Yet when we choose not to, and we take that teaching and we allow it to work in our lives, then the next one that comes along is a new level, and it's that much easier to get through.
Yeah.
And it is out of love, birthed out of love.
Yeah.